In the early hours of May 1945, the roads outside a small Bavarian town were silent. Engines sat cold. Canvas tops sagged under weeks of rain. Parked along a hedgerow were dozens of light military vehicles, their tires slowly sinking into mud. Some still carried unit markings. Others had already been stripped of radios, fuel cans, and tools. No orders were coming. No drivers were returning. These vehicles had survived years of war, only to be left where the fighting stopped. What they were, and what would happen to them next, was not yet clear. By the spring of 1945, the European war had reached its final phase. Germany's military system was collapsing under simultaneous pressure from the West and the East. Fuel stocks were exhausted. Rail networks were shattered by bombing. Command authority below the highest levels had disintegrated. Units surrendered or dissolved in place. Equipment of every type, tanks, trucks, motorcycles, light utility vehicles, was abandoned across Germany, Austria, Czechoslovakia, and occupied territories. Among these were thousands of light four-wheeled military vehicles, commonly referred to after the war as jeeps, though Germany had no single standardized equivalent. Throughout the war, the German armed forces relied heavily on light utility vehicles for reconnaissance, liaison, artillery spotting, and supply runs. The most common were produced by firms such as Volkswagen, Stower, BMW, and Horch. Designs included the Kübelwagen type Bachelor, the Schwimmwagen type 166, and a range of four-wheel drive reconnaissance cars. By Ijo Sisiv, more than Woolwen Kübelwagons alone had been produced. Serving on every front from North Africa to the Arctic Circle, they were simple, lightweight, fuel-efficient, and designed for mass production under wartime constraints. The scale of this vehicle fleet was immense. At its peak in 1943, the German army operated well over 400,000 motor vehicles of all types. Light utility vehicles made up a significant fraction, numbering in the tens of thousands at any given time. They were deployed with infantry divisions, panzer formations, Luftwaffe airfield units, and occupation forces. Production facilities were spread across Central Europe, with assembly plants in Wolfsburg, Stuttgart, and occupied territories. Compared to heavy armor, these vehicles were cheap, requiring less steel, fewer skilled workers, and minimal machining. Their strategic value lay in mobility rather than firepower. The planning behind these vehicles emphasized standardization and ease of repair. Cooled engines reduced vulnerability to freezing. Flat panels simplified manufacturing. Parts were interchangeable across batches. In theory, a Kübelwagen could be repaired in the field using basic tools and salvaged components. The vehicles were intended to move officers, messages, light cargo, and small units quickly across damaged infrastructure. In practice, their effectiveness depended entirely on fuel availability, trained drivers, and intact command structures. By late 1944, those conditions no longer existed. Allied bombing had reduced German fuel production to a fraction of pre-war levels. Synthetic fuel plants were priority targets. Deliveries were irregular and often non-existent. Vehicles were immobilized not by enemy fire but by empty tanks. Units abandoned them during retreats or simply left them behind when fuel ran out. Many were cannibalized for parts before being deserted. Tires were removed, engines stripped. Anything portable and valuable was taken. When Allied forces advanced into Germany, they encountered vast vehicle parks left intact. American, British, and Soviet troops reported fields, forests, and factory yards filled with light vehicles. Some were damaged by air attack, others were mechanically sound. In many cases, keys were still in the ignition. Allied technical intelligence units cataloged these finds carefully. Reports noted the simplicity of German designs, their efficient use of materials, and their ability to operate under poor conditions. However, investigation quickly revealed their limitations. German light vehicles lacked the standardized four-wheel drive systems that had made the American Jeep so versatile. Many were rear-wheel drive only. Their payload capacity was limited. Suspension systems were fragile under heavy loads. Post-war testing by Allied engineers showed that while German vehicles were economical, they were less adaptable to varied terrain and heavier logistical demands. Maintenance had been simplified, but at the cost of durability. After Germany's unconditional surrender in May 1945, control of all military equipment passed to the occupying powers. The fate of Germany's light vehicles varied by zone. In the American and British zones, vehicles deemed usable were temporarily pressed into service. They were repainted, remarked, and assigned to occupation units for transport and patrol duties. In the Soviet zone, large numbers were seized as reparations. Trains loaded with vehicles moved eastward, many never to be seen again. Despite this temporary reuse, the majority were marked for disposal. The reasons were economic and logistical. Spare parts production had ceased. German factories were dismantled or retooled. Standardization across Allied forces favored American-designed vehicles already produced in the hundreds of thousands. Maintaining a separate supply chain for captured German light vehicles made little sense. Fuel compatibility, maintenance manuals, and training all posed problems. Scrapping began almost immediately. Between 1945 and 1948, tens of thousands of German military vehicles were dismantled for metal. Steel shortages across Europe were severe. Reconstruction demanded raw materials. Vehicles were cut apart in depots, rail yards, and improvised scrap yards. Engines were melted down. Frames were crushed. In some regions, civilian populations salvaged abandoned vehicles themselves, converting them into farm machinery, generators, or improvised transport. A smaller number entered civilian life intact. In rural areas, former military vehicles were registered for agricultural use. Canvas tops were replaced with wooden panels. Military markings were removed. Engines were modified to run on lower-grade fuels. These conversions were unofficial at first, but later legalized under occupation authorities. By the early 1950s, however, even these survivors were increasingly rare as newer civilian vehicles became available. Allied technical assessments concluded that Germany's light military vehicles represented an efficient response to industrial constraints, but not a technological breakthrough. They were products of necessity rather than innovation. Their design philosophy emphasized minimalism and mass production under pressure. Post-war military planning in NATO and the Warsaw Pact drew lessons from their limitations rather than their successes. By the time West Germany began rearming in the mid-1950s, none of the wartime light vehicles remained in official service. New designs were adopted based on post-war standards, improved suspension systems, and interoperability with Allied forces. The old vehicles had no place in this framework. Museums preserved only a handful. Most disappeared without record. Today, when a restored Kübelwagen or Schwimmwagen appears at a historical exhibition, it represents the survival of an exception. The vast majority of Germany's wartime light vehicles ended their existence quietly. Cut apart for scrap or worn down through civilian improvisation, they left little trace compared to tanks or aircraft. Yet during the war, they carried messages, officers, supplies, and wounded men across every front. Their disappearance after 1945 was not dramatic. It was administrative, economic, and deliberate. In the end, our story returns to those silent roads in 1945. Vehicles built for speed and movement stood motionless as the war ended around them. They were tools of a system that had exhausted itself. Once that system collapsed, there was no reason for them to remain. They did not symbolize victory or defeat. They simply ceased to be useful.